was obviously built in the Norman period in the 12th century. Obviously after William the Conqueror did his business at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. However, this place was very, very ancient even before that. Another king by the name of Vortigern, who was here just before, who's reigned just before King Arthur, he actually let some of the Saxons into the country to actually try and fight battles on his behalf, and unfortunately he let too many of them in and they just started to take over basically, and they landed at a place called Ebbsfleet further down the Thames, on the Isle of Thanet, where you got Margate and Ramsgate today, and I think that was 449 AD, and that's, you know, that was where everything changed basically. And then you had the whole period of the Saxons and the Vikings, where there was hardly any building in stone really. A few churches were built in stone. Most of it was all done with woods and logs and the rest of it. It wasn't until the Normans came here and they revived all of these legends to do with the Celts, because they wanted to associate themselves with the Celts and not the Saxons. So that, you know, they probably generated this whole thing about Bran and Arthur and all the rest of it. They deliberately pumped up whatever traditions were here in association with the Tower of London. But I think what's really important to remember, I mean, obviously these ravens, as Caroline said, it's said that you know, the folklore is that as long as these ravens remain, and obviously they're symbols of Bran, then Britain is safe, right? But as Caroline said, they clip their wings so they can't get away anyway. So, and apparently a couple were eaten by foxes recently. Yeah. So, and the other important thing to remember is that just the other side of the Tower of London, as you'll see next, is the River Thames. A very, very sacred river, probably a representation of the Milky Way, and was sacred to various goddesses in the past. But we'll talk to you about that when we go round there, and we'll probably have a very quick meditation around there as well. Look, obviously this is the River Thames, and its Roman name was Themisis, and although there is, you know, etymologically, place name wise, you know, there are logical reasons for this. Oh, it's just the name of this, or Tem means something or other. There is a very strong tradition, and it's a magical one more than anything else, that Themisis records the name Isis within it. And a section of the River Thames further up in Oxford is actually called the River Isis. And of course Isis is an Egyptian goddess. She was the consort, the partner of Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, and it's her that actually, you know, when he dies at the hands of his brother Set, his twin brother, she goes off and finds all the 14 bits, brings them back together, and, you know, revives him long enough to copulate with him, and produce the child Horus. So you think, well, what's she doing here? Well, it is a fact that many of the Egyptian gods and goddesses, particularly Osiris, Isis, but also Sekhmet, Anubis, the dog-headed god, travelled far during the time of the Roman Empire, and their cults went through various transitions, and they became associated with the local gods and goddesses of the area as well. And I mean, for instance, there's been inscriptions to Anubis found in London in connection with a gladiator, the remains of a gladiator, and some people have even suggested that the Isle of Dogs, you know, has some connection with the cult of Anubis, you know, some kind of guardian, you know, like guardian of the underworld, because the river itself, almost certainly, like the Nile River, what Robert Bouval was saying yesterday, was a representation of the Milky Way. Almost certainly it was. There are certain traditions that suggest this, and in all honesty, probably all major rivers of the world have some connection with the Milky Way. It's almost as if they're extensions on the Earth. And the Milky Way is this waterway of the stars, and that at certain times it actually links with the material waterways that we have. Anyway, back to Isis. Now, a good few years ago, some jars were found on the south side, just over there, and they had on them for the Temple of Isis.
London.
Sorry?
To the Temple of Isis, London.
Oh right, to the Temple of Isis, London, right, or Londinium, which was the old name of London. And it was always assumed by archaeologists, because they found them, that they were obviously being unloaded, and therefore the Temple of Isis was on the south side. But for various reasons, work that Caroline and I did whilst I was doing the book The Cygnus Mystery, seemed to suggest that it wasn't over there at all. It was actually on the north side. There was actually an altar found with an inscription of Isis, or certainly connected with the cult of Isis, on this side of the water, which some historians felt had actually come from the Temple of Isis, and it must have been local. And the other thing is that that the work of a British historian by the name of Michael Harrison worked out that the actual location, and felt that it was going to be very close to the other main Roman temples dedicated to Mithras, which we'll see the site of shortly, and also the Serapeum, the temple of the god Serapis. Now, Serapis was a Roman form of the cult of Osiris mixed in with the cult of the Apis bull, which was another Egyptian thing, and this became a very popular cult of Serapis, this joint god. And there was a Serapeum in London. Again, we'll show you where that is shortly. He worked out it must be close to there, and he saw that there was a lane right next to there called Sisse Lane, S-I-S-E, and he looked at the derivations, the early forms of it, and became convinced that this was, originally it was basically Isis Lane, and we'll see this shortly. So what we're getting at is that there's almost certainly a cult of Isis here, but her cult was probably not the same as what it would have been in Egypt. She would have been associated with Venus, almost certainly the goddess Venus, because the two goddesses became fused together, because one of her symbols became the swan or the goose, and that was almost certainly adopted from the cult of Venus, and she almost certainly was grafted on to some kind of British goddess here somewhere. Right, okay, come off the road if you can, please. Don't want you dead. Right, okay, just a brief one. This is the monument that marks the location where allegedly the Great Fire of London began in 1666. I mean, obviously that was the year after the Great Plague of London, so it was in many ways seen as a cleansing thing. And in the aftermath of that, London was rebuilt, mostly under the leadership or the auspice of Sir Christopher Wren. And Wren did that monument, didn't he? I believe it was. Yes. His monument. And originally wanted to put a phoenix on the top of it. And the original designs that show it with the phoenix rising up from the flames, but somebody obviously thought that wasn't a clever idea. I think you've got globes or something on the top of it now. But I mean, there's a lot of weirdness connected with this place. I mean, you can go up inside it, but we haven't got time today. There's a lot that suggests that it's geomantically placed. That the whole idea of the Great Fire beginning in this, this baker's shop is just a cover for the fact of wanting to build this monument here, and that many people like Adrian Gilbert have written, and others have written about the fact that Wren's monument seemed to form this impression of what's known as the Tree of Life, the Kabbalistic device that's used based on the St Paul's Cathedral, which we'll see, which was built by him, the monument, various other of the churches. There's a whole sacred geometry involved with that, that there was a big underlying thing, and that he himself was a part of the Royal Society. The Royal Society had come from this mystical movement known as the Rosicrucians, or who are also known as the Invisible College, and they had all this ancient wisdom that went back probably to the time of the Templars, and beyond that even to Gnostic traditions, and it's all part of that. So when they rebuilt London, it almost became like this, almost like this Masonic, you know, city. And obviously in them days, Freemason was very new, and it was a lot more mystical, presumably, than it is today. So there was a lot of good things in that at the time. So just be aware of that, you know, that this is here. When we go to St Paul's Cathedral, the same influence is going to be there, basically. It's a megalith, but it's only a small fragment of it, I'm afraid. I mean, originally it was how big? Was it about 15 feet tall?
Yeah,
it may have even been bigger than that, 15, 20 feet tall.
Which means it would have gone almost half as much into the earth.
Yeah, oh that's right, and it was said to be just as much deep as it was high. So it was a huge, great megalith, like some of the ones you find in Brittany, like some of the ones you find maybe even today in Yorkshire, you know, what are called, Devil's Arrows, things like that. But very gradually it got whittled down, but what it represented was the centre point of London, and it was basically said that, you know, from here the whole country was measured, essentially, and even when it got quite small, it was still used for proclamations. The Mayor of London would come here, you know, to you know, swear things, and during the Peasants' Revolt, was it 1381? Yeah, sure. Any revolts? Well, that anyway, the Peasants' Revolt. When they came up from Kent, right? Was it Jack Cade?
Yes,
Jack Cade. There was another geezer, wasn't there? I can't remember his name. Came from the other round. Anyway, they came to here. Tyler? They actually came to this spot. They came to the London Stone and basically proclaimed that they wanted to take over, and got a sword, basically banged it down onto the London Stone as an act, you know, and obviously it all started going massively wrong for them at that point, basically.
All the Lord Mayors.
But clearly the Temple of Mithras is not there anymore, basically. And here's an image of Mithras himself, with the bull. I mean, this whole symbol. I mean, look at the signs of the zodiac in the circle there. Represents the cycle of the sun throughout the year. Also the processional cycle across a much longer period, and you can see Mithras stabbing the bull, and beneath it I think there should be a scorpion biting the bull's testicles, and there should be a snake there somewhere, and there's a little dog biting the bull as well. And a writer by the name, a scholar named Alan Ullensay, in a book on Mithras, the name escapes me at the moment, but it's something other Mithras, he basically says that this thing, which is known as the tauroctomy or something, if I can't remember the exact words, it's a star map basically, and it represents a moment in time, and it's the transition from the age of Taurus into the age of Aries, which took place approximately this is about 2000 BC, and it was obviously a mystery cult. You learned the mysteries of religion, the secrets of the universe, things like that, and it came from the Middle East, almost certainly Persia, probably connecting with the god Perseus. There's a few good books written on the origins of the cult of Mithras, which suggests it probably goes back to around 3000 BC, possibly even 4000 BC. and arguably it probably goes back an awful lot further, but certainly it was very popular and fully flowered, you know, fully in full flower form within the Roman period. And there were Mithras in, you know, many places. That there were several in the UK. There certainly was one in a couple in Kent, for instance. There's one in London here.
One in Paris.
One in Paris. But the important thing about it is that these temples generally were all bunched together. So you had the Temple of Mithras here, but next to it was the Serapeum. And the Serapeum, as I mentioned, down at the Thames, was the cult of Osiris and the Apis bull joined together to form one new god called Serapis. And his temples were known as the Serapeums, and that was there. But whenever you had a Serapeum connected with Osiris, obviously there was an accompanying temple of Isis. And that's why we know that it was in this area and not in Southwark on the other side of the river. So you won't be able to see anything. By all means, try and look through these holes here at the building work. London Before Rome, by Michael Harrison. I mean, he gives this incredible argument to show that the Temple of Isis was here, and that fitted precisely with what we were working out, because we realised that there was some kind of cult of the swan related to this whole area. There was so much swan stuff going back to medieval times in this area, and that when we found out about this, and that the Temple of Isis was almost certainly here, either where this road is or where this lane is, it made absolute sense. Because, as I said, Isis, the cult of Isis, took on attributes of the cult of Venus, whose symbol was the swan or the goose that she rides or whatever. There's loads of statues of Venus that have been found connected with goose or swans, and that makes absolutely sense of how that became associated with this area of London. Also we're very obviously close to the Serapeum, which was there. I mean, you know, we've only just come around the other side of where we were talking before. So the Serapeum and the Temple of Mithras were here, and probably other places as well. I mean, some of the churches here, very old churches, almost certainly stood on the site of pagan temples as well. So this was almost the point of sanctity, and I mean, we're so close to the London Stone as well. So this was the real heartland of the city of London, and also for the whole country, of course, really. I mean, this is the point where the Romans came. They sort of saw this as ground zero, really, for the whole of Britain. But I've got a funny story I've got to tell you about the rediscovery of this Temple of Isis, because the first time I came here, I can't remember what year it was. I think it was in 2005. Caroline, is that right? 2005? Can it be? Okay. Well, anyway, I was here, and a London bus came past, and I probably noticed it, but I didn't see who was on it. But who was on it was Lynn Picnic and Clive Prince, the writers of the Temple of Revelation and other books, which all talk about the revival of the cult of Magdalene, having come originally from the cult of Isis. They came past on this bus, saw myself and my ex here, and at that moment they were filming the Da Vinci Code with Tom Hanks actually doing the whole thing as the bus went past, and they'd been invited onto it by Dan Brown of the Da Vinci Code, because he picked up their book inside the Da Vinci Code, and they got friends after it, and they were invited to play extras, actually sitting on the bus, and as the bus went past. So when the film came out, I was sort of, you know, waiting to look for as the bus went past. You can't see us, but as I said, it's so strange, because obviously it was at that very moment that we first reached here, the Temple of Isis, and you know, Clive Prince, Clive Prince and Lynn Picnic have done a hell of a lot to show that the cult of Isis survived within the cult of the Magdalene and obviously the Virgin Mary as well, within within Christianity. So just a weird synchronicity.
If you
I mean, obviously there was originally a St Paul's Church here, and before this there was a temple of Diana on this site. Diana was obviously another big goddess of the Roman world. They found lots of evidence of that. In fact, when Wren actually dug down, he found stuff, and there's lots of evidences. I've got books that talk about what was found, and it's pretty conclusive that this Diana temple was here. But I think you're probably dying to.